Greetings from the set of choices. We are happy that you have joined us today in our discussion on a journey, this journey called life. We are so delighted that we can bring to you from our great city, Georgetown, Guyana, as we discuss this precious and valuable gift called life. You know, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat of its fruit. Today we want to encourage you to speak life. Speak life over your family. Choose life today. God bless you.
You know, just last week we started to discuss the whole value of life. And this evening, as we continue this discussion, even if we had not believed that this discussion was needed now, the events of the past week certainly validates our decision to discuss the value of life. You know, as we read the papers and we hear of somebody being killed, a pensioner being killed in his home, murdered, the police is still trying to figure out why. We hear of a young, I think it was a 14 or a 13-year-old walking through the cemetery in the country area, and he's just found dead in the cemetery. We hear of somebody who apparently was up to nefarious activities, looks as if they were about to rob someone, but a vigilante takes matters into his own hands and kills that person. A person is turning around on somebody's bridge. Just like that. The homeowner opens fire on them. The person is killed, the partner is critically wounded. And we ask ourselves, what is going on in society? Do we no longer value life? You know, it's the instinctive thing to blame the government. But you know where it all starts? It's in the home, the family. We have to ask ourselves, what are we teaching in the homes? Why is it that persons seem to be so much on a knife edge? It's like everybody is ready to shoot. Are we in fear? Are we living in fear? If we're living in fear, why are we living in fear? You know, life is often about what we put in. We can't, in computing world, they say garbage in, garbage out. We have to seriously look at what it is that we are teaching in the home, what it is we are teaching in the church, what are we teaching in the schools, because persons are not responding well to the situation that they are faced with in life. And that's why we want to continue this discussion. What it is we need to do to learn to value life more. Gentlemen.
You know, actions have consequences. And sometimes we don't see the consequences of our actions. If any nation, any society is going to do well, going to advance, we need all the resources, all the human resources that we have. And so if we continue to kill one another, we continue to murder one another, what we are actually doing is depleting our human resource. Yeah. We are destroying people, because the thing about it is that lots of people, good people, end up dying because of the carelessness and the disorder and discipline that some people are cultivating and have been cultivating in their homes. And so you might destroy someone who might be able to help you in the future. And that is what we can't see. And so it is incumbent upon families seriously to train and to teach. These are words that we've been using from time immemorial, you know, on this program, teaching and training, because at the end of the day, without a sound education, and education doesn't necessarily refer to mathematics and science and so on, it's basic teaching, values, passing of information, traditions, and how one ought to conduct his or herself. And so here again, this short-tempered kind of behavior that we see forthcoming from members in the family is as a direct result of persons not taking time to teach and to train, and we want to impress upon family members, fathers, and the organizations, the institutions like the school again, to cultivate order and discipline in society. We can't be shooting people because you get vexed. You will be vexed every day. Somebody will get you vexed. So what you'll do? Kill everybody, and before you know it, you're alone, left standing like an island by yourself. So we have to watch that kind of behavior.
You know, Pastor Hudson, you talk about those actions that we cannot see. And may I also add, it's not only depleting our human resources, but look at the rippling effect, the vexation, the fear, the anger.
Yeah.
So many families are affected by this kind of behavior. So we really and truly have to examine what we teach in our homes and teach our children how to resolve conflict. And the whole thing about life is that you don't take matters in your own hand. You don't just decide one day, well, okay, I'm going to just wipe out this person because of some wrong or something that they have done. But we have to be wise, and we have to be strong and you know, resolve conflict and allow these matters to come to an end and move on in life.
When the society becomes a throwaway society, where you dispose of things that perhaps in one's view is not necessary, is an irritant, and while that is being done, the other voices in society remain quiet. It emboldens a certain set of people who feel that you're not just dealing with garbage, but they are people who could actually describe other humans as wasteful and equate them with garbage. Therefore, in their sick mind, they would look at some people and say, well, nothing wrong if you rid the society of these of folks like this. And this, I don't know if we are becoming like that as a society. Certainly we are disposing more garbage than we ever did in our whole life cycle. So we're not just a nation of poor people. We have people who have resources, clearly, by that thing that we see, and we are acquiring more than we actually need. We need to examine those things. Let us look. I mean, you talk about computing, G.I. Joe, and is the amount of violent movies we're watching a contributory factor? And I'm not talking about adults only. Children are watching these violent movies. Children are watching games filled with violence. And so if a child, I mean, the craze now, the Pokemon craze now, that would see people hanging out by coffee, see people hanging out at different places in this town. People are trying to, could people be trying to capture that, you know? So people turn on my bridge and I can blow this person away. I don't know whether the person has been affected by some experience in the past, but clearly we need to think again. But in this Billy the Kid mindset, is the fastest gun runners will survive? Is that the direction where we're going? So we need to come back to home. We need to come back to Sunday school. Or we need to come back to where you teach your children, where you send them to receive instruction and values and those kinds of things. Or else, if you walk and you mash somebody's foot in the market, they could shoot you. You know, if people don't value life, we could have some crazy things happening.
We seem to, I don't know, as I listen to the discussion, as I watch the media, it seems as if we have, you know, the law of the West. As a teenager, I read so many Westerns, you know, and it seems as if you can do anything a man hurt you, you can just move him out of the way. There is no value for life. And that was emphasized here. But I want to suggest that as we teach to choose life. Starts with you as a person, as an individual. My choice is life. My choice is to live. I tell people when they ask me how long you want to live, I say, I want to be 120 and I will be healthy and strong and move around. Because my choice is life. Choose life. Teach your children how to appreciate life, how to value life, how life is sacred. You know, one man said, though I don't quite believe, he said there's only one life to live. And I say, choose life. Build on life. Support people who believe in the concept of living. Create an atmosphere of life. There is growth, there is development. I am trying to establish, this whole idea that it's a positive mindset to just choose life.
As a nation, our population is not really growing. You look at the last report, and when you consider the vastness of this country, and like Pastor Watson was saying, we need every human resource to develop this country. The other side to it is that fear can drive quite a lot of persons away. Upward of 70% of all graduates leave. So if we add to that factor the whole issue of fear, the wanton killing of young lives, then we may end up being a nation where we are unable to utilize, maximize the resources that we are blessed with. So apart from what we need to do, in my view, is to intensify the teaching of values for life. The home is pivotal, is the initial point to where we must start. We see signs around the country where parents are the children's first teachers. But we need to spread it from there, not just the home. Every institution in this land, we need to have a concerted effort where we teach the value
Pastor, I just spoke up here that only this week I heard someone in their attempt to analyze what is happening in society made the observation that we have too many young parents. As a matter of fact, we were suggesting that it was children, raising children, and how could you teach what you don't know? How could you raise up a child when you yourself need to be taught? And it struck me and it caused me to be thinking. And my response then, and I'm throwing it out, was that the structures in society therefore need to kick in. Because if you have such an environment, then you need grandmothers and grandfathers, community leaders, church leaders, school structures, to be able to kick in. And you cannot create an atmosphere where the dominant way to raise to parent children is being a child yourself. You somehow have to cut that culture has to change within the environment so that you will be able to, and I'm an educator here, you have to find a way somehow to stylie that kind of culture so that a better culture so that you can be able to be better able to train and raise.
Pastor, I think to to follow up on what you're saying, part of the teaching I think that is very much needed now is to teach people to define their situations before they embark on a certain course of action. And you might know there's a gentleman by the name of W.I. Thomas who said preliminary to any self-determined active behavior, there is always a period of deliberation and examination, which he says is the definition of the situation. I think people now have to extend that period, because what he was saying, there is nothing like impulse. You say, man, I acted on impulse. He's saying that there's always a period, a window period where you get a concept of, what the consequences might be. And I think people have to start defining their situations now. What are the consequences? You just can't act, man. You have to take a window period and say, if I take this particular course of action, what will happen? And therefore, that's why a man chop another man, then after he finish chopping the man, he's running down the road. That's madness. So you have to define the situation. You have to say, look, you have to see yourself running down the road after not chopping people and then running down the road.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to start telling our children, as part of the teaching process, examine the end result of your action. That must form part of our teaching.
Pastor Hudson, well said. If we dealing with the culture, we have persons who are hearing with their eyes and thinking with their feelings, and people become emotionally involved. They don't think with the brain, man. They think with their feelings, so they do things on impulse. I feel this way, I do it. I was on the Lower East Coast just a few days ago by a tire shop, and the young man came from the courts, and he was rowing. I thought the guy was insane. He was rowing. He did not get the kind of recourse that he expected to get from the courts. And he said, I am going to burn down his home, and I'm going to chop him up, and y'all gonna come for me instead of going for him. Where did that come from? I read in one of the dailies quite recently that one of our main institutions is the least trusted in the country. And I'm asking myself this question: if this institution is supposed to serve and protect, and they are the least trusted, then we will have situations like we are having. People who want to take actions into their own hands. It's not something right. It shouldn't be done. But then we got to come to this place where we can put our confidence in the people and the institutions that are put in place to help us to serve as better citizens. Pastor Lee, you alluded to fear. You alluded to the fact that people are leaving. Crises and problems are not limited in geographic locations. It's worldwide. And so anywhere you go, but if you find that there are systems in place to help me to better serve as a citizen, I will go where I feel more comfortable.
Education and information sharing is bigger than mathematics, learning physics, chemistry. It has got to be holistic in nature. There are some who are enemies of so-called organized religion, and therefore they were stuck. They're interested in education, and they have but another set of values that they want to teach, and they want to see instituted. They want to develop something like a youth policy, and they want the youth policy, you're reaching youth, and you are denuding that policy of anything spiritual, religious.
I find it.
The chickens will come
It's
home
madness.
to roost one day.
Yeah.
The thing about it is that we have a whole set of systems and structures that we are appealing to. We're saying the family must do different things. We're saying that the institution, but we're making a big assumption that these institutions are in place and their philosophy is in sync with sound reasoning. We are making an assumption that these structures and systems that are in place are going in the same direction of the family. Sometimes these things are in direct opposition of each other, and the result is you giving people things like weapons, and you believe they're bright. They could read and write, but they have no understanding of consequences. They do not think about consequences. I can do this, and if they don't like it, I can do it again. That's the kind of situation. So when you have the bramble leading the forest, you have major problems here. So this is an appeal. Life is a gift from God, and it behooves all of us to attempt to understand how we intended us to live in the first place, and the set of values we should embrace, and how, as Jesus said, the greatest commandment is that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. And if we could go back into that area, very irrespective of religion, you know, there's a cartoon, is it a cartoon? There's a video on Facebook that I've watched that. It shows a man dressed in like Middle Eastern garb, you know. His head is tied, he has on a frock, and he comes with a bag at the train station or in a bus, and he just takes his bag off and he throws it into that context. And people don't ask no question. I haven't seen in any, people just run away, you know. People have a perception and they associate that kind of person with violence, with mayhem and everything. I mean, I laugh uncontrollably, I'm wondering what's really going on here. So, what's the big deal in Guyana? That we now driving into churchyards with buses filled with alcohol and people sporting. What's the big deal? That while you're grieving, we seem to be associating grieving with death and celebration. It's a confused system. And I don't think it's only an urban something. I think it's right across this country. So we are in a quandary and we need direction. We need help. We need people beginning again with family. And we need those who are power brokers to begin to align structures and systems with time-tested methods. Listen, the biblical tradition is time-tested. It is proven.
You know, Pastor Lee says early on about teaching values. But at this time I want to share some of the blames on the fathers. As you rightfully said, Pastor, I never know that Pokemon thing was so viral by coffee. But if fathers should take their rightful place in the home, you know, they feel that getting a child here and a child there, that is it. But when you leave a woman with the children, and she got to fend for herself, she leaves and she gone in the night to work. They are home all by themselves. They're looking at the television, what they want to do, who wants to visit. So I think that fathers should take their rightful place in the home. Many times you want to blame the government. But if we cannot put those systems in place to bring that thing, you know, the other day I was in Sophia and two young fellas had a squabble. And I was made to understand that one of them, he's less than 8. He went to the other guy's home and tell the parents, if I see you on the road, I'll kill you. What are we bringing up? Where are the values? Fathers, we need to instill in our children, we need to set an example before them. Our lives must be an example to them. But if you spending hours looking at Pokemon on the road, who are there to teach them the values? And then when they get themselves into trouble, we wonder why. We blame the government.
You know, the environment is so critical also, and I think we've been saying that in terms of the product that will eventually emerge. I'm sure that young man at less than 8, 7 years plus, that language had to develop and come from somewhere. It didn't come from within him. He must have been hearing that even if it is not in his home, in the community, and here is where even the community has a role to play also in terms of shaping and molding. Some communities, and let's face it, they're dominated with violence and talk of ill will and so on, and these are the things that must be addressed, and not just the family but the whole community spirit, you know, how it is that we are to live. And we heard about the importance of love. You know, love covers a multitude of sins, and so people now, you know, I think the time has come for us to start sharing love. What we do must border on love. A child hasn't got to be your child before before you speak to that child, before you say something to that child. For some people, that not me own, so me not concerned. But at the end of the day, if you don't show the concern and make the connection between the members of your community and your own life could become miserable too. So we have to start thinking along those lines.
As I was going down the road, I was taking my daughter to school, to St. Joseph, and they were going over the road. So the cars, well, the parapet is muddy, and the cars are trying to drive two abreast. So I drove deliberately in the center of the road, and so that the children could walk on the road itself, not to walk in the mud. And then it began to rain, and there was this East Indian woman. She took out an umbrella, and she had her son next to her, and attempted to cover him. And there's this small black child going to Stella Maris school, walking, and she pulled him under the umbrella. And he resisted, and she attempted again, and she pulled him, and she covered both of them, and she was outside, she was getting some drizzle. So when I dropped my daughter off to school, I drove up, I said, "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't have a camera, I was taking your photograph out with what you're doing here, and send it to the newspapers to print." And she said, "Man, this here is a child, and not only a child, it's a Guyanese child." And so she looked past, we're talking about ethnicity, she looked past that, and she saw the importance of assisting a child who was getting wet in the rain.
It's really amazing, and I regret you shared this so late in the program, but that is a commendable effort and observation. I read the account of a very rich Californian. He lived on a mountain. He lived all by himself, fortified with cameras and dogs and security. And there was a riot he wrote about, and that was taking place miles away from him. He had invited some of his friends. They went on his balcony, and they were literally overlooking what was happening, flares and everything miles away. And he said, that could never come here. I am absolutely unconcerned about what's happening here. Those people will kill themselves. His friend, who is an academic type, made a note of that. He wrote a book about it. And he said, in 2 years, that same protesting and everything went right up that man's hill. And he wondered what he was saying. If we remain neutral when we see all these things happening to our neighbors, to our friends, and we fool ourselves into believing that could never happen to us, you have another thing coming. Let us deal with it before it comes to our house. This is Choices. We'll see you next week.
We thank you for joining us this evening. We want to remind you to join us for our special services at First Assembly. I'm Celicia on behalf of the set, reminding you that your whole life is the sum of your choices. God bless you.